Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Kia ora. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. I'm going to take you on a little trip. I'm going to take you into a few places, many of them smaller than Gisborne. And I want to share with you what makes these places tick economically. What makes these places, in many cases, go-to places on a global scale. I want to share with you in part what's the magic of such places, and places that have the ability to attract wealth, attract customers, to attract a presence on a global scale. And one of the points I'm going to emphasize as I go through this is places that are together, places that are linked, places that connect. I'm from a small place myself. It's a little place near Snowdonia in Wales. You might have heard of a little place called Llanfair. It's just next door to there. I had to leave that place, and so did my four brothers. And part of what I want to share with you is places where kids don't need to leave. Kids stay, and they stay in particular because there's quality jobs. And quality jobs often where they can engage with the outside world in living in a place as you are here with a beautiful beach right next door to you. So stories about places. First story, and I want to use this place to demystify what the word cluster is. It's a natural occurrence. And Little Scone, much smaller than Gisborne, has a global reach, particularly for thoroughbred horses. I hear in part it's because there's limestone in the soil, and the calcium I hear has fed through to the bones of the horses, the thoroughbreds. There's some 75 thoroughbred studs in Little Scone. And if you're a stud owner in the Middle East or in Kentucky, you know about Scone. And maybe if you're looking at buying an Australian thoroughbred, it's the only place you go to. Small place, global reach. Part of the magic in Little Scone is not just the 75 thoroughbred studs, but it's also a polytechnic there that specializes in equine. It's the largest equine hospital in the Southern Hemisphere. So over time, different elements of the jigsaw have come together in Little Scone to put it truly on the world map. We're close to a great beach here. And those of you that are surfies perhaps are familiar with Bell's Beach in Torquay. And like the way Torquay calls itself the surfing capital, it certainly surf tourists, as you get here in Gisborne. But it's also the home of two companies, Rip Curl, Quicksilver, two of Australia's fashion icons. This is where they grew up, in Little Torquay. And using this as an example of diversification evolving from something that a place is already good at doing. Certainly these companies, as well as Bell's Beach, have got a global awareness, a global reach. I'm getting a little bit technical here. This is a slide showing the Cairns, Queensland tourism cluster. And using this slide to emphasize a tourism cluster is more than just the sector. Yes, it's certainly, as we see in blue, it's the hotels, it's the activities, the restaurants, the travel agents, the cruise ships, it's the travel agents, the tour operators. It is also the healthcare, the local transport, the souvenirs. It's the food suppliers, it's the property services, it's the government agencies, it's the educational institutions, it's the industry groups, often the private sector organizations. And a key in any cluster is, do these different elements fit together? Or are they, and what I see too often, they're pulling in different directions rather than agreeing, woohoo, this is what we've got to do, folks. These are the things that we've got to get into place. And often difficult to get a range of businesses, academic institutions, government agencies, to get all those ducks in a row. But it's one of the keys to building a high-performance community. You've got a lot of logs. 95%, 96% leave unprocessed. Here's a place in Sweden that also has a lot of logs. Almost 100% were leaving unprocessed. It was the mayor in this little place, and little, 30,000, so Gisborne size. It was the mayor who said, not only are we shipping out this raw timber, but we're also shipping out our best school leavers. And as the mayor said to me, my 2 daughters have left. Maybe when they retire, they might come back. But right now they've gone because they weren't quality jobs. And the question for the mayor was, firstly, how do we provide quality jobs to our school kids? And secondly, how do we add value to this pile of wood rather than shipping it out as a commodity? The mayor isn't a forestry expert, but what she did have was good skills in bringing key people round her table to explore. To explore in particular, how do we be smart about our resource? What they've developed is what is called today the biorefinery of the future. And it is a place that stands out on a world scale. I've been here with forestry experts from Finland, from British Columbia and Canada, and they both said, woohoo, we don't have anything like this at home. This place stands out. This is the concept. Sorry, this is a bit of a busy slide. The concept was, let's strip down our raw material almost to the molecule. And then let's understand what's the best application of that. Is it as a biofuel? Is it as a building resource? Is it as a nutraceutical ingredient? Let's understand deeply what we've got and then see where do we add value to that. This is how this little place is working. It's a number of businesses, quite a few businesses, and businesses that compete and compete very strongly. But they're also able to collaborate. They're able to work through where have we got common agendas. So it is amongst these businesses a culture of co-opetition and a competition, a culture that is in part built on respect. They know each other. They're comfortable in sitting down with each other. They're comfortable in part in sitting down and just partially opening their jackets, not fully, because for any business, there should be things that I don't want to share that with you. I don't want to talk about that. But for other things, let's explore. Let's explore where 2 and 2 might make 5. So it's a number of businesses. There are 5 universities in this remote place. Go back 10 years when I first went there. There was a polytech that did nothing that was related to forestry. It was secretarial courses, home care, basic courses, nothing for forestry. Now, 5 universities have got PhD students in this small place. Why? Because this is where the knowledge is being developed. It's where the knowledge is being created. Over here, a number of different Swedish agencies. This is the Callahan equivalent. This is Sweden's Small Business Development Agency. This is the NZTE equivalent, commune of the regional governments. What the mayor has succeeded in doing is getting all these different folk on the same page. And by bringing them together, the word together coming up again, by bringing them together, found a way to bake a much bigger pie. Things that none of these folk could do flying individually. So she succeeded in moving from a series of silos to building a system. And it's a system that stands out. One of these companies, Domjo, Swedish name, it's now owned by an Indian textile giant. An Indian company that was based on cotton textiles. They were looking for somewhere in the world to explore cellulose as a raw material for their textile industry. They scoured the world, looked everywhere, and finally bought this little company in Sweden. There were no subsidies, no grants, no soft loans to the company. The company is there because it wants to get inside that tent. And often the knowledge in these places is only accessible once you're inside the tent and accepted, and then people will start opening their jackets. So highlighting here investments that come to a place not because of a PDF grant, not because of soft loans, but because this place, like a place, stacks up on a world scale as a go-to place for a specific activity. This is the team, and it's a team as they started weren't that comfortable in sitting down. They still compete, but they know each other well enough. And being Swedes, there's probably been enough alcoholic lubrication between them. They know each other's soft points. They know what people don't want to share, and they're able to work through, where do we share? Where do we open up to each other? Let me take you to another place that has a lot of trees. North of Venice. This is a 7-story high chair. These are real people. So these aren't little toys underneath a chair. That's the scale. And this place is proudly saying to the world, what we do is make chairs. We're numero uno in the world in making chairs. They had a lot of trees, as you do. There were sawmills. People started adding value to the sawn lumber. Some people making furniture, other people making building products, window frames, and over time found where we seem to make the best buck is chairs. And as that specialization developed, the market that this place is servicing moved out from northern Italy to Europe, to the world. This is truly a global supplier of chairs. Indeed, today, many of the chairs coming out of this place in northern Italy have no wood in them at all. They're metal chairs, high-value office chairs, $1,000, $2,000 chairs. And this is the world supplier. One of the secrets to this place is this. It's the culture amongst these firms. And many of these firms are very specialized. Some of the firms, perhaps, are steam bending wood. Other firms turning chair legs. Other firms perhaps preparing wool or preparing leather for chairs. It's a cluster of many specialized firms that in different ways work together. Maybe there's a group of 3 firms that are working together to supply Starbucks in Europe with chairs. And perhaps there's another group working together to supply Holiday Inns. And maybe another group is even competing with that group, putting in that tender to Holiday Inns. It's a very flexible arrangement amongst these folk that is based on trust. And these businesses know very quickly who isn't performing, who's laying off people, who isn't paying their bills, but also who's got the specialist machinery or the specialist skills to do that particular job. There's a lot of knowledge that flows amongst them. So highlighting here again this key word, it's a co-opetition culture amongst these firms. And that is a key element in their success. I'm still on a timber track here. Estonia, and been there a few times, stands out for kit set prefabricated homes. Some 85% of their homes are exported in containers, exported to the world. Yes, it's nice to have Sweden and Finland and other places nearby, but they go to Japan, they go to the US, they go to Canada, they go to China, they go to the world. It's 17 different companies that at times compete with each other. That's healthy. But they collaborate in trade fairs. They collaborate in doing designs, for example, in better understanding how can we make our houses more thermally efficient, or combine in doing technology to look at new timber frame constructions. Fundamentally, they're competitors. But there's enough trust between them to explore where do we join forces. One more example on timber, southern Germany, Bavaria, a huge cluster. Many companies, different applications, different things going on here, but a clustering initiative that in part acts as the umbrella that connects the businesses to the training institutions, the universities, the different government agencies. I've taken you into 3 forestry clusters, one in Sweden, the biorefinery, into Estonia, into Germany. I could take you into other places in a similar way, focusing on different aspects, bringing people together around a particular objective. Other examples, Transylvania. This is one in Canada, Ontario, Canada. North of Toronto, a place that has, I think it's maple, that is their raw material, but bringing together a number of businesses that at times compete, but also collaborate. So a question here, where do we fit into this? A question in part is, what's our point of difference? Because it's difficult to be a me too to any of these. What's our specialization? What are we really good at doing here? And can we bring the teamwork, the alignment that I'm describing in these other places around that specialization? Or have we just got a series of silos that are struggling? And there's a number of you here in honey. Just put up your hands for a moment. There's a bit of a buzz in honey. Good on you. Good on you. And I've been working in Wales with the Welsh honey cluster. And it's a cluster that, to start off with, was bringing together a number of different honey producers who are uncomfortable in sitting at the same table together. And slowly working through, where do you open your jacket? What are the key pressure points? What are the things that need to be done beyond your business to support your individual business? Is it training? Is it some regulatory issues? What are the ingredients that you and your business can't address flying solo? That's what this cluster is doing in Wales. And let me continue with food for a moment. Yep, here we go, Wendy. I want to take you to the Sunshine Coast and just drill down a little bit with this example. This is a cluster, Sunshine Coast, Noosa, Gympie, Moreton Bay. Okay, it's like the way that you describe what they're doing. Connect and grow our region's food and agribusiness, creating a culture of collaboration. It's the connect, it's the collaboration, it's the grow bit. It is, as they say loud and clear, it's about the connections. It's about removing the isolation. It's about building different companies, support organizations into a local team. Some 200 members, arranged from farmers, food processors, chefs, food tourism, a number of different academic institutions, different government agencies, are all sitting around the same table and all exploring, how do we crank this up between us? How do we improve our ability to create quality jobs? How do we upgrade our competitiveness? It's not a large team. Emma, the general manager, well, she's paid for 25 hours a week. I suspect she does a lot more than that. None of her support staff are doing more than 15 hours a week. It's a lean team, but it's a team that particularly knows those 200 businesses and support organizations, is able to connect the dots, is able to see where are their common agendas, where are their common pressure points. It's got a board that is business-led. The chairperson, Jackie, from memory, I think she was a McKinsey consultant, now living on the Sunshine Coast. She's volunteered her time. None of these people are paid. They're all saying, yeah, I'll pitch in to help bake a bigger pie for the Sunshine Coast. Mix of folk, it's an elected board. They have sponsors as one way of gathering the funding to support the core staff, to support the core projects, the activities like their website. Current program, it's a number of networking events, different business activities, If you've driven up the main road north of Brisbane, after about an hour and a half, you might have noticed that the big pineapple on your left. That big pineapple is now their food hub. It's particularly a place with common facilities to help start up food businesses. And many of these clusters have got a particular emphasis on how do we get the next generation of businesses coming through. And maybe businesses that threaten the established businesses within our cluster. That's healthy. Everybody needs pressure to keep themselves on the toes. Final slide here on FAN, as it's called, in the Sunshine Coast. I like the way this chef says, great way for producers to network and help each other's businesses to grow. A direct avenue for restaurant chefs to meet, develop relationships with farmers, distributors. It's a mechanism that connects, that helps this chef identify where he's going to get his quality products from. It's a mechanism with the small folk, the small team that act as the management for this initiative, know the 200 players and know that you're talking about exporting to Japan for the first time, and so are you, and so are you. Let's come together for a coffee and explore. Let's perhaps bring in an NZTE equivalent for that coffee. I've taken you to Food and Agribusiness FAN in the Sunshine Coast. I could have taken you to Food and Fibre Gippsland, which is east of Melbourne, covering a broad bit of geography, mainly vegetable producers, salad producers, finding ways to work as a team. I could have taken you to Launceston in Tasmania, where there's a cluster that different focus there is on fermentation technology that underpins their wine, underpins their cider, their beer, underpins adding value to second-grade vegetables. These three clusters in Australia have got financial support from an organisation called FIAL, Food Innovation Australia Limited. It's an organisation funded in Australia by the Callaghan equivalent, and they organised a competition across Australia to identify which are the lead clusters that we should support, and these were 3 of the 4 winners. I could have taken you into other places. Another click, please. I could have taken you north of Adelaide. I could have taken you to Colorado, the Food Island Partnership in Prince Edward Island, Canada, that is bringing together potato producers, lobster folk, aquaculture companies. I could have taken you to Denmark or Vegipolis in France or in Lithuania or here in Flanders. Or I could have taken you to the Welsh food cluster, of which their honey group is a subcomponent. Or to the food cluster in Lower Austria or Rotterdam, or a food service cluster in Barcelona. Or here in the Basque Country, a cluster, one here in southern Sweden that I visited 3-4 times. Or I could have taken you to Food Valley in Holland, that is the global mega cluster. Within 50 kilometers of one city, Wageningen in Holland, there's 1,500 food companies. And nobody's forced them to be there. They're there because they want to get inside that tent to tap into the knowledge. And a question, again, for you here. Where do we fit into this? What's our point of difference? And maybe thinking about these food clusters around the world as providing a fast track to enable or to help your food exporters here. A question, where do we fit in? What's our point of difference? And maybe thinking about these clusters around the world as a fast-track mechanism that enables your food exporters, your emerging food exporters, to quickly establish contacts, be it in Rotterdam, be it in Canada, be it in Colorado, around the world. And a lot of European work now is linking related clusters to help build the business-to-business connections within Europe. I've taken you, we're going now. I've taken you into a range of clusters. I took you firstly into Little Scone, the top one there. If you're a buyer of socks, There's a place in China, Datang, population about 100,000. Datang produces something like a third of the world's socks. In a way, these specializations are making it a lot easier for international buyers. They don't need to go here, there, and everywhere. Certainly, if you're a buyer of radish seeds in Holland, you know about South Canterbury. And maybe that's the only place you go. And a question then for a Gisborne is, what are we good at doing here? What are we darn good at doing? Because in today's world, you can't be a little bit of everything. Sorry, those days have gone. What are we really, really good at doing where we can be a supplier on a global scale or can be a magnet on a global scale? There's a lot of evidence that the clusters that I've talked about particularly provide an environment that enables firms to quickly grow. And firms that are based in those sort of clusters tend to be more successful than firms that are elsewhere in that country. There's a lot of evidence from an economic development perspective that these places generate jobs, high-paying jobs, generate productivity, the innovation, the entrepreneurship, the startups. Importantly, not just the startups, but also the scale-ups. The scale-ups that stay in a Gisborne because Gisborne is the natural place to be for XYZ activity. What makes these places tick? And I'm drawing here on a bit of work that looked particularly at places that had struggled over time, often called Rust Belt communities, and then reinvented themselves. One of the things, they're connected, they're together. Second, they're able to brain share. A business moves from thinking about, I need to have everything under my roof, to thinking about, hey, this is my specialization, other things I can go elsewhere for. There's trust, there's knowledge. So a culture, connected, it's brain sharing, and these places are not a little bit of everything. They're focused. 1, 2, 3 specializations. And specializations, as I've said a number of times, often have a global reach. As I look at clustering initiatives, yep, we've got a natural cluster. How do we crank it up? How do we move it to the next level? First point I'm making here, these initiatives are business-led, and they move at the speed of business. It is often an organization, and don't press the, just hold on. It is often an organization like Wendy's. Just wanted to acknowledge you there, Wendy, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Often an organization like Wendy's that initially brings people together, that provides the neutral corner. And then maybe that organization continues to work with that specialization, that cluster. But important for long-term success that it's business-led. Secondly, public agencies and support. So public agencies able to listen. Public agencies like Callahan, like NZTE, like Trust Tairawhiti here. Able to listen, to respond, rather than a clutter of public agencies having different views on what are the needs of that particular community, that particular cluster. Third point here, there's knowledge. And knowledge, as I described in the forestry place, the biorefinery of the future, knowledge, it's PhD students there. But it might be knowledge at a high school level, at a college level, where kids at college are learning about adding value to wood, or doing things with wood, or learning about certain aspects of tourism, or learning about different food products and food cuisine. So a cluster in Sweden, another one in Sweden, is a robotics cluster. I was with the mayor, and I asked him, well, what are you doing to support the robotics cluster? He said, well, I'm on the board of the initiative. I said, good on you, mate, that's good. But what else are you doing? I said, we're building a new high school here. And that high school is going to have a focus on robotics. There will be classrooms, facilities, labs for mechatronics, for other technical things. And this was the killer coming from the mayor. He said, I want half the kids at that high school to be girls. So good on you, Mayor. That's what long-term economic development is. Preparing the next generation of kids. It's not the only thing that goes on at that school, clearly, but there is a specialization there that relates to the economic activities in that community. And my fourth point here, it's teamwork. It's alignment. It's being able to talk. It's being able to share. It's teamwork too. Yep, between the small guys and the big guys. And often the big guys don't know how to talk to the small guys. And the small guys don't know how to reach out to the big guys. So often it needs a neutral corner, a broker, who knows the small folk and the big folk and is able to bring them together. The big folk often have got market clout. The small guys often have got the innovation, the new products, the new ways of doing things. We need both in a community, but too often they don't talk. And as I wrap up here, let me raise this point. Many regions around New Zealand think about attracting an ocean liner. And I'm not talking about cruise ships, but I'm thinking about a large plant, a large factory, whether it's Auckland-owned, internationally owned, whatever. We focus on attracting that investment to our location. I'm arguing the world has changed. And particularly in the places I've taken you to, it has changed to 100 powerboats. 100 powerboats that are exploring, testing, exploring new options. But they're aligned powerboats. And encourage you, when you're thinking about Gisborne and the future, encourage you to think about, how do we build this? And as I look at the background material that I've been going through, there isn't that much about startups. There's a lot about training. There's a lot about preparing people for jobs. But there's not much that I've been reading that is about preparing people to create their own job, to set up their own business. And that's what I see in these other places. It is a startup community that is in part changing, exploring new initiatives. And just to emphasize once more, it's places that specialize. It's places that are no longer dreaming about, we need to be diversified and have a little bit of everything. But if they are diversified, it's diversified with deep capabilities in specific areas. And perhaps those specific areas cross over, such as maybe tourism and honey crossover, or tourism and wine crossover. And then we're starting to cook with gas. Finally, cluster development is about understanding what needs to happen beyond our individual firms. Where are there common agendas, common pressure points? It's about building the ecosystem, the trainees, the access, the knowledge that leads not just to one or two companies, but hopefully a whole roster of companies growing that comfortably call Gisborne home. And as they expand, saying, this is where I'm going to stay. And I'm staying here not just because of the surf, but I'm staying here because this is the knowledge center. This is where I can tap into what I need to help me grow my business. That's what I wanted to share with you in terms of exploring the relevance, sharing with you some different stories from different parts of the world. Stories about how many of these places smaller than you have over time found, hey, this is what we're good at doing. Now, can we bring the team together? Can we bring the key players? Can we work through how do we connect the dots in our community to really crank up on a global scale? Question, does it have to be the mayor or who takes the lead? No, it doesn't have to be the mayor. It helps if the mayor is frustrated and saying essentially, bugger it, we've got to change what we're doing here. But it could be anybody in the room who says, let me reach out to others. Let me build a coalition of the willing around XYZ activity. It's a voluntary group. Nobody has to do this. Even that mayor in Sweden didn't have to do it. She could have just been a bit laid back. But no, she was saying, I'm going to shake, rattle and roll because it's not good enough what we're doing for our school kids. It doesn't need to be a mayor. It helps if you've got that clout or if you've got those connections. But an early thing is build a coalition of the willing around you. And that, I think, is what, Barry, what you've done with honey, in saying, let's explore. We're not too sure where we're going to go on this journey. We're not too sure what it's going to be, what it's going to deliver. But you're saying, bugger it. The same old isn't going to deliver. How do we change? How do we move forward? Good on you. Question there, do we all need to be in the same sector? Or could we be different activities coming together? What I see is when different activities come together, the common denominator amongst them can be pretty low. And maybe the common denominator perhaps is, well, it's container shipping out of the port, or it's the attitude of school leavers, which are important. Whereas if you're bringing together perhaps the honey folk, a more specialized group, then common denominators tend to be more fundamental to the growth of those businesses. So often useful to have some sort of high-level clearinghouse, but also this more specific in drilling down around our regional specializations. How do you monitor quality within a cluster? Let me share with you a story, and this comes from Italy. From one of the clusters there, one of the companies had reduced its quality without really making it clear to customers. Customers were disappointed and were coming back to the cluster and saying, you guys don't match up anymore. So one company was really lowering the field for everybody. This is an Italian response. 10 of the companies, 10 companies that used the same bank as that renegade company, they went and sat down with the bank manager and said, we want you to reduce or to take away your overdraft facilities to this company because they're letting the side down. And they said, we want an answer from you before we leave. And if that answer isn't satisfactory, 10 of us are moving our bank accounts. It's an Italian way, but what happens in a more gentle way often is word gets around that somebody isn't performing, somebody isn't, and slowly staff know that, customers know that, suppliers know that, and slowly that company is excommunicated. Sometimes I see, perhaps for a food product or even for there is a minimum standard. And in order to use the brand of the cluster, you need to reach that minimum standard. And if you don't reach the minimum standard, sorry. But it's not easy because somebody's got to decide who's reached and who hasn't, who's in and who's out. So I much prefer, not the Italian example, but more informal. If you're not performing, word moves around and you're excommunicated.
So you're not using the cluster to bring up.
Yeah, that's right.
And bring up, those.
You're right. Thank you. You're right. I step back a little bit. So a first step would be for the cluster manager or whoever it might be to support that company and to help them build their quality up to match the standards. You're right. Thank you for your prodding, your further prodding. Good on you. Please. Nice question. The implications of COVID-19 and the crisis and the changes, and particularly and clearly the changes to international tourism with our gates being absolutely closed and unfair enough too. One of the changes that I'm seeing, and I'm picking this up from a number of different sectors, supply chains are shortening. So people are more aware of their supplier's supplier, or even further down, and perhaps aware that woohoo, a key component, I didn't realize it, but it's actually coming from China or coming from somewhere else. So there is a trend to supply chain shortening, which can be good, where we're thinking within New Zealand or within a Gisborne, instead of outsourcing that, is there a subcontractor? Is there somebody here that can do it in-house? So the customer has got more control. What I also see is strong clustering initiatives, particularly in Europe, have been able to respond very quickly to the crisis, and been able to do that because there's trust, because they know who's who in their zoo. They're not trying to start from scratch. So been able, for example, a textile cluster in Barcelona, able to quickly respond in developing masks and gowns. Another cluster in Sweden, able to quickly respond in developing ventilation equipment for hospitals. Because they've got different electronic components, the plastics folk, they've got the community, able to bring them together quickly.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what makes clusters stagnate and die? What are the to avoid?
But Barry, people do a PhD thesis on this. Sometimes they die, and die often over time, but in a global environment it can be a bit quicker than it would have been 20, 30 years ago. They die because people don't trust each other. Sometimes they die because everybody thinks the future is over here, the technology is moving over here. And it's the same mindset by everybody in that cluster, and they're focusing over there, but actually the future's over here. So there's a sort of myopia. Sometimes they die or struggle when different government agencies are pulling that cluster in different directions. And different government agencies aren't listening to what are the needs of that cluster, but rather determining from on high, hey, this is the support that we're offering you. Now just be thankful, and then go away. So describing, and again, it's the importance of the togetherness, the partnerships, the dialogue, the testing. I sometimes see, just one more point, clusters die when the board of the clustering initiative is just public agency folk. And they're well-meaning, but they're not in immediate contact with the market, with the customers. And perhaps it's a culture amongst those folk on the board of paralysis by analysis, rather than a more business culture of let's learn by doing and let's get on with it. And that really needs to be the culture of a fast-moving clustering initiative. Hey, let's explore. Somebody's saying the Japan market is a priority. Let's check it out. But we'll also check out China, and we'll also check out other places, and let's see, and let's learn quickly, rather than commissioning market research, perhaps. And I see in many parts of the world programs with school kids to help school kids think about creating their own job, creating a product that may end up within a business. I see different public agencies helping particularly folk that have been laid off. And many of the most successful businesses around the world are started by people perhaps in their 30s, their 40s. They've got a lot of experience. They're laid off, and they think, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I want to build up my own show. So those are important folk to help encourage, and often many parts of the world have got programs to help those folk set up their own business and get going, to move from a product, a concept, and to verify that concept, and then to build a business around it. Nice question, and your question in essence is how far should we open our jackets? Should we open them totally, or are there some aspects that we close off? I find from a business perspective, a businessman doesn't want to open totally. And important for any business to think through, what's my core competency? What is it that attracts customers to my business rather than my competitors? What is it that gives me an edge? And I'd argue, that's closed, that's red light. Don't share that. You need to understand it. And need to understand in part, what don't I share? But other things, maybe I've got half-empty trucks going to Napier, and so is my competitor. Can we share? Maybe my competitor is buying the same packaging as I do. Can we join forces and see if we can get a better price? So collaboration within particular areas that are non-threatening. So I never talk in a cluster about, hey, everybody's got to take their jackets off even. But rather encourage businesses to think through, what's the heart of your business? What gives you an edge? And often find, as trust develops, that heart is actually narrowed. People are willing to open their jackets a little bit more, but never totally. Thank you. Good questions. Back to Holly.